Well, look, thanks very much. It's not often that I'm described as the sharpest tool in the kit anywhere, especially in Parliament. Can I say thank you to Barry and the team for inviting me. I have been a social entrepreneur for a very long time. People tell me I'm on my, I think, 47th. A lot of them still going, but like all enterprises, we social entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs, and some of the things that we start do not succeed. Others do succeed, but you know some of the marks of success is moving on and letting someone take control. We are. Social entrepreneurs is a bit of a description that's useful, but we're all entrepreneurs. Sometimes it's more difficult to be a social entrepreneur than it is to be a regular entrepreneur. I used to be on an advisory group for the Prince of Wales, and I used to make myself unpopular by saying that in a social enterprise and in a charity in the third sector, if it was harder to know whether you were wasting the resources at your disposal. There was always a bit of a grant you could get, or a bit of a subsidy, or you'd finagle the books. And unlike the private sector, you know, where if you can't pay the wages at the end of the week or end of the month, and you can't pay your bills, you know that you are not going to continue trading. And it's sometimes more difficult to know that in social enterprise. But obviously they have a great deal in common. I'm here, I suppose, because I'm absolutely sick to death of asking rich people for money. I'm sick to death of applying for grants from big foundations and trusts. I'm sick to death of sidling up to people and saying, look, this is a really good cause. It will transform young people's existence because we're going to give them work, or we're going to give them access to the countryside, all the other things I'm interested in. But the fact of the matter is, as I saw crowdfunding, crowdsourcing developing and people started talking about it, I thought, wow, this could be a different way of funding some of the things that I'm very passionate about. And so that basically, that is why I'm here. Can I tell you that when Barry asked me to speak, I phoned the House. I read all the literature I could find. I found we have a fantastic library in the House of Commons, and the library in the House of Commons said we never heard of crowdfunding and crowdsourcing, so they couldn't help me. So that shows what a great cusp we're on. So humility, because when I started talking to you guys, I came to learn as a student. Barry even said the other day when he made the trip across to Huddersfield in my constituency that he would be a bit of a mentor to me, and Nadia Granata is also from Huddersfield, is also there, although he's just done an analysis of how good I am on the social media, but he luckily only chose 3 other competitors, and I'm including himself, and I came number 1, so I'm not bad, 1 out of 4. Now, so I've got a vision about where we were going to go with this stuff. And I do regular enterprise as well. I employ quite a lot of people. One of the organisations that I chair is Policy Connect. I was terribly upset about the poor way that we made policy in the House of Commons in Parliament. And you know, what is irritating if you're a legislator, if you're a parliamentarian and you have some influence, is the quality of knowledge that you have. And indeed, the longer you're in Parliament, the less you know about the real world in many cases. And so if you don't build bridges between people outside Parliament for people inside Parliament, we are in a terrible state. And one of the reasons we get bad policy is because people think it is not for them to talk to members of either house of Parliament. And a Conservative MP and myself, about 17 years ago, started a group that actually said to come into the House of Commons, to talk to people who are making the law and changing law. You don't have to be wealthy. You don't have to hire a lobbyist. You don't have to have a public relations expert. You, as right, can come in. And Policy Connect has grown over the years. We now have a turnover of over $1.25 million. We employ 20 bright young graduates. We're based just down in the Community Action Network and CAN buildings in Southwark, and we have a building bridge between what happens outside and into Parliament. And it's transparent, it's scrutinised by an independent scrutiny board, but it actually opens up the policy-making process to people like yourselves. And we met, when I was trying to get into this, I tweeted about wanting to learn about crowdsourcing, crowdfunding, and I had a deluge of information. And so we had 3 breakfast meetings, around early meetings in the House of Commons, and all sorts of good people, some of you are here today, turned up. And we resolved, after those 3 meetings, that we will run a regular Westminster forum on crowdfunding, crowdsourcing. So first meeting's on the 6th of March, the first formal meeting, and we will let you know if you want to be involved, get in touch with us. The fact of the matter is, it can only be good. There was a very good question of the gentleman over here, and he picked on me being the only legislator here, and he was quite right. Whether you want good legislation or bad legislation, I hope you prefer good. If you want good regulation or no regulation, well, you better be involved. Because if most parliamentarians have never heard of you, or never heard of this new wave, this exciting new wave, then you better make sure they do. If that can be to stop regulation, it could be improve regulation. It really is very important that we get this right. For me, as far as I've done my research so far, the less regulation, the better, is the sort of message I'm getting. And I spent many years chairing the preparation of the Euro Committee when my deputy was Vince Cable, and we go back a long way. And I know Vince is actually very well informed about this sector and wants to make sure that it grows in the way that I'm sure everyone who spoke this morning and everyone asked questions wants it to do. I suppose the difference between me and some of the speakers this morning is I am fascinated by new businesses. I have a set speech about Huddersfield. Huddersfield didn't exist until the Industrial Revolution. And the only reason there's a town in the place that is Huddersfield in Yorkshire is because cheap energy flowing from the Pennines, water that powered the mills, and then obviously replaced by coal. We had high skills. We learnt to spin and weave to a high specification, and people wanted that high quality product. But the third element was, for some reason, out of that part of Yorkshire, we produced entrepreneurs. None of the other stuff would have happened if it hadn't been for this, whatever it was. Was it something in the water? Was it something about the education system? What was it about that time in the 18th, 19th century that produced so many innovators, so many inventors, so many wonderful people with absolutely fantastic searching, inquiring minds, and most of all, could turn that into real entrepreneurship that created wealth, unemployed people, and paid, and I have to say, paid people well. Look at my constituency today. Only 10% of people in this country work in manufacturing employment. Yeah, about 30% work in education, health, and local authorities, people like to call the public services. 60% of our people work in private services. And if you're at the good end of private services, good on you. You know, most of you are in private services, and I bet you don't live on the minimum wage. Very high percentage of the people I represent are in early years care or later years care. They're in retail and distribution, and they live on minimum wage plus, or minimum wage plus. You cannot have the good life on minimum wage. You can't have the good life on quite a lot better than that. So what we're all in this room surely about is producing highly successful entrepreneurs that produce great employment that pays well. Now, I started my very first, when I was a university teacher many years ago, when I worked for a living, I got into this by starting worker cooperatives. And I started the first cooperative development agency in England. So I was passionate about empowering people to control their lives. What's changed in my life is that I can see what you guys know about will empower the sort of thing and the people like me to do it more effectively. And that is the more I hear, and I feel I came into the end of your talk, but I missed it, I think. Well, I'm sure that's not true, because even in your other contributions, you certainly made me think. But the fact of the matter is that this is an opportunity an opportunity to, for a renaissance in our towns and cities. Walk through, I've got a competition on Twitter at the moment about crane spotting, you know. If I get up in the morning in my London house and I look out the window, I can see a dozen cranes. If I go into Westminster, I look out of a different window and another dozen cranes. If I cross the other side of London, there are another dozen cranes. So I've started a crane spotting exercise. You know, where in your town and city can you see cranes? I tell you, they're not many. Anywhere in the UK outside London and the South East. And our towns, and the town centre manager, a gentleman who was talking on the panel, you know, I am about regeneration of our communities. There's something amazingly happening, and there is a dark side and there is a light side to that. Well, the dark side is you can see the shops boarded up in almost every town and city you go to. There's a revolution going on in retailing brought about by the internet. But there are great opportunities coming in terms of employment, startups, and new cooperative ventures, and more social enterprise. And what's fascinating about all the people I meet in your sector, they seem to know about the relationship between good business, making a profit, but also adding social value. I think this is a real opportunity to rethink the kind of this late stage of capitalism that we're in. Nothing wrong with entrepreneurialism, nothing wrong with capitalism, but let's make sure it works further deep into the 21st century. I want to finish by saying, look, something Barry said to me I thought was very important. He said, look, okay, what the FSA have done gives the green light to all this. I'm not quite sure about that. I think it's more of an amber light, because we've got to make sure that the regulation or lack of regulation means that in the UK we can expand this faster and more innovatively than anybody else. Barry also said we want to ground this in being real world and practical. And I love this whole notion of not whether it's lending or investing or pre-sale or rewards. And of course, with me, being involved in so much charitable work, you know, this is my real opportunity in many of the charities and third sectors to reach out to an audience that, you know, believes in the strange things I believe in. I own the John Clare, the English Poets' House. Died 200 years ago. One of our greatest poets of the countryside. Yeah, I've raised £2.5 million for that enterprise, buying his house, turning it into a national centre for learning outside the classroom. And now my latest venture, I bought the pub next door in order to have the Spark programme, young people, young undergraduates, young postgraduates, not yet employed, working with business mentors, working with NEETs, bringing kids into the countryside. The likelihood of any child going into the countryside has dropped by half in the last 10 years. Yeah? No green space. They don't go out into the countryside. And one of my passions is to do just that. And now I'm working with some of you to make sure that I can reach out to the sort of audience and the sort of backers and the sort of people that will give money in order to see a good social outcome. So, as an entrepreneur who's been doing this for 30 years, 35 years, I've never had this opportunity to bounce over what I've called the rich people and the big foundations. And I'm not ungrateful when somebody gives me a big cheque, and I think I only got, it was a bad week last week, I got 2 cheques for £5,000 and one for £1,000. That was a bad week. And I'm very grateful when people give me lumps like that, because I've been nice to them and I've persuaded them that I've got a good product and I've marketed it well. But this gives me an opportunity to put noughts on the level of activity that I do. And if I can do that more in partnership, and I can persuade my colleagues in the House of Commons, 649 of them, to get up to date, to learn about what you do, to realise the opportunities, we've got some real revolution going on in our country, and it's a revolution for good. Thank you.